Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the A-Team Bad Guys franchise series. I'm delighted this evening to be joined by Joey Aresco, who played the character Presley in Season 2, Episode 4 of the A-Team TV series Bad Time on the Border. Joey played a character called Presley, who owned a sort of a sweatshop, Presley's casual sort of sweatshop, where Mexican immigrants worked illegally in sort of slave type conditions. Presley's character as well was closely associated to a character called Prince, who was played by Dennis Lipscomb, who basically Dennis Lipscomb got arranged for the Mexican immigrants to come to Presley's casual sweatshop, while the person who trafficked them across the border was a border patrol called Peppard, who was played by the one and only Jack King. And I suppose, Joey, first of all, to be associated with an iconic TV series like the A-Team that has back in, I suppose, that episode is a long time ago now, October the 11th, 1983. But to be associated with a TV series that has skimmed the whole sort of the world and has sort of legendary characters like Hannibal's mate, played by the late great George Peppard, Dwight Schultz, who played Murdoch, Templeton Peck, played by Dirk Benedict, Mr. T, who played B. Baracus. To be a part of that, it must be a real great honor for you.
Yeah, it is. As you talk about the show now, I'm starting to have faint memories of how that came to pass. I originally was considered for the Dwight Schultz part, and I didn't get that part. And I know that the producers liked me, and usually back in those days, in the cave days, back in the 80s, when producers liked you, even though you didn't get a certain part because they went another way with someone else, they would bring you in for episodes. They did that for Kojak. They did that for Rockford Files. They did that for the psychiatrist part on MASH. They wanted me, but I was too young. So yeah, I remember that they brought me in and I did a bad guy. It had something to do with immigration, and that rang a bell, that I was trafficking in illegal immigrants. I remember that now. I don't remember very much about individual scenes, where we shot and things like that. I think part of it was in Long Beach, I'm not sure. But I do have faint recollections now of the show, now that you bring it up.
And I suppose, Joey, part of your scene involving the A-Team was when the A-Team came to your sweatshop, pretending to looking for information to try and find where the immigrants had gone, and obviously Hannibal. And there's a scene where they're trying to interrogate you to get information out of you, and B.A. Baracus, played by Mr. T, sort of roughens you up a bit in terms of trying to get that information out of you.
Yes, I remember Mr. T, I think, primarily because I remember having lunch with him, sitting next to him, having lunch with him one day, and he was apologizing. He was a very gentle guy, a really nice guy, and I think he had to rough me up in this scene, and he was concerned that maybe he was a little rough and maybe he'd hurt me or give me some bruises. And I said, no, it was fine. It was good. It was all okay. And he was very concerned that because he was this big, strong guy, and I think he was concerned that maybe he was a little too rough on me, but he wasn't. He was a really a sweet, big teddy bear kind of guy.
And there was a good scene in terms of that episode, a really good sort of fight scene where you order your henchmen to come in terms of the A-Team, and then Mr. T sets about taking out these sort of henchmen, and we see bodies going through glass, and we see bodies going through doors, and there's a part where you're just sort of hiding there under the bench waiting to see what sort of happens. And then once your goons are taken care of, all eyes switch back on you, and you become a sort of a panic state then.
Yeah, I kind of remember Yeah, I was that kind of character, that kind of slightly slimy, cowardly bad guy in a way, I was willing to throw all my minions, my evil minions, offer them up, for bait for Mr. T to sort of, shred these guys and throw them through windows and through chairs and desks and hit them on the head and throw them into, throw them across the room and stuff. And I'm hiding and cowering and wondering how this is going to work out. And I remember thinking, boy, I'm glad I'm not some of those stuntmen, because they had, those stunts. And I'm really glad I'm not one of those stunt guys getting hurled across the room into this, even though it's, breakaway glass and it's breakaway, desks and things like that they were throwing these guys into. And they weren't getting hurt and they knew how to fall. I was thinking, boy, this is a good thing I'm not having to do any of this myself. And then I look out and I see that he's kind of taking care of my crew. And now what? So it's always fun to do physical kind of stuff like that, because being an actor, sometimes you're really sitting a lot and you're memorizing lines and things like that. But when you do action, it's really a lot of fun.
And I suppose, Joey, in terms of back in the 1980s, it was very common that if you appeared in a series, in terms of a character, that you could have a recurring role, you could play different characters within the multiple seasons. And sometimes some person appeared in different sorts of shows throughout the seasons, playing different characters, but with practically the same sort of appearance or same face. That sort of trend sort of died down in the 90s and 2000s, when you got really hardcore fans who probably recognize a person in a TV series and associate him with that sort of character. So TV producers didn't want to invite that person back to play a different character because a face would be associated with that sort of a character. So that wasn't the trend back in the 80s at all, because I'm just talking about that episode, Jack Ging, who played Border Patrol Taggart. He played a number of different characters in the 18 TV series, and General Bullwright, and he played numbers of characters. And yes, he never really changed his appearance with Jack Ging, but he was in various different roles. That sort of trend sort of went with the end of the 80s.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't find that experience happen for me that much. I remember being told, actually, by producers that, and I would tell my agent, if someone offered me a part on in an episode, especially if it was a bad guy part, which I mostly played because I'm some reason Italians always, your name ends with an O, your last name, and you're playing Gaggio or some, Richie Gaggio and Kojak or Rockford Files or whatever bad guy parts I played. They associate you so strongly with being this bad guy that they say to you, we probably won't be able to have you back unless this particular part comes up again, because everyone knows who you are, and they wouldn't accept you in another role. They wouldn't want to see that because you're this guy that played the bad guy on that episode. So I would have to be careful if it was at the beginning of the season and the part wasn't that great. I would sometimes wait, turning down a part of a bad guy, and see if a better part came up later in the season, because I knew I wouldn't be able to go back. It was kind of a rule of thumb that if you did an episode of a show, that you really couldn't come back unless that character came back for the season. Now, the next season you could do another part, but not that season because it was too close to when you just appeared as this other character.
So you're telling me, in that light, Joey, you could appear in season 1 as a particular bad guy, and then you could also appear in, say, season 4 as a different bad guy with a complete...
Yes, right, but not in the same season. Yeah.
I wasn't really aware of that. And in terms of Joey, in terms of working on the A-Team, you mentioned having lunch with Mr. T, and obviously he's a big sort of physical sort of presence. Were you taken back by the sheer size of the man and the sheer sort of scale of the presence of the man? Because I imagine back in the 80s, he was a very intimidating sort of figure to even be sitting across from him.
Yeah, he was. You know, when you're on the set, you're having lunch, you know, on those tables with the caterers and stuff, and he came up and sat down next to me, and he, you know, it was like he needed like 2 chairs to sit to people kind of cleared out, you know, because he was such a big, imposing guy, and he had all this great. I think I remember the most about him was that he had that big gold plate, all the jewelry stuff. He was this big kind of larger than life person. He was really he was a really sweet guy, though, very gentle, very sweet, nice to talk to, fun. We laughed a lot. Like I said, it's 83. I was I was 33 years old. I don't remember all that great about. I did a lot of work in the 70s and the 80s and up to the mid 90s. A lot of on camera. So I don't remember a lot of experiences in particular, unless they were usually if I had problems with an actor or I had problems with a director or something like that. And I don't remember having any problems on that show. The people were really pretty nice.
And Joey, you mentioned there about the 80s in terms of the stunt guys, and I suppose back then, I suppose to be on set as a stunt guy, you just in terms of your henchmen, they did probably take up a few nasty bruises and knocks, and I suppose, you know, in terms of being a stunt guy in the 80s, you really did get hurt if you weren't really an expert in your sort of a field compared to what stunt guys in today in the modern sort of a stunt guy, everything's so qualified that I suppose if a drop of blood came out of a stunt guy in the 2020, it'd be a major shock.
Oh yeah, they've really clamped down on that a lot. I have to admit, I was a real kind of a baby about the stunt thing. I mean, to me, anything that was at all physical was a stunt, because in the early 80s, I was on a soap opera called Capital on CBS, and it was just a pushing scene at a party. And I told the director it wasn't very well choreographed, and I said, you know, this is how people get hurt, because the adrenaline gets flowing because everyone's excited that it's on camera, and so they want to look real. And the guy came pushing into me when I was pushing into him. We'd said we were going to do this and that, and it didn't work out right, and I broke my right thumb. I had a cast on my arm for up to my elbow for 6 weeks. And then on Beretta once, they asked me if I could ride a motorcycle up this little step in a park. It was like 5 little steps, and I was a motorcycle. I had a motorcycle, a Harley, and I was always rode Harleys. And I said, sure, I can do that, but I didn't account for the fact that I had on street shoes and my foot fell off the peg, and I ended up with 10 stitches in my finger, almost lost my finger. So I would say to people, look, I'm not doing anything where there's a possibility that I could get hurt. And they didn't want me to, because if an actor gets hurt and they have to shut down, as you probably know from, you know, talking to lots of actors, if they lose an actor for the day, that sets them back in their schedule, and that's a lot of money. So they were very quick to throw stunt people under the bus because they were disposable in a way. You could always get another stunt guy to come in if he got hurt, but you couldn't get me back if I couldn't work, you know?
And I suppose, Joey, you mentioned the A-Team back in the 80s, and probably one of the biggest TV series in the world. Once you completed that role, to have that on your resume as such, does it really open up doors and opportunities when people look through you, when you look through your resume, and when you're going for the roles and they say, oh, you appeared in the A-Team, and they look at and that sort of shows, you know, all around the world. Does it shows like that, do they really develop other opportunities for an actor?
I don't know that in the present, at the time when you're working on the shows, it develops more work for you, because what was happening then was you have an agent, and each time you get a job, a guest star, especially a guest starring job, I usually either my PR firm or my agent or myself would take out an ad in Variety or Reporter, and a little ad for a few $100 saying that I was on the Rockford Files or Medical Center or Kojak or whatever, or A-Team, and it would be in the Variety or Reporter. People would watch it. I'd go up for more. You go up for more jobs, the more jobs you get. That's sort of always been the thing with actors. The more you work, the more you work. And back in the 70s and the 80s, I was working a lot, and all the casting directors, they would be aware of the fact that, oh, Joey Aresco's working again. He's on the A-Team this week. Oh, there's this part coming up in Medical Center. You know, he'd be really right for that. And he just did the A. Yeah, let's try and get him on that. And I'd go in for an interview for that, and I'd book that. Or Quincy, let's bring him for that and read for that. Or Rockford Files. And then they like you. And then before you know it, you end up getting a television series or something with their network.
And I suppose, Joey, I don't know if you worked with George Peppard in your time, but in terms of the 80s, George was probably in the top of his game in terms of the early start of the 80s, a world sort of renowned sort of an actor as such. And the A-Team was probably one of the pinnacles for him. And we all know his sad demise and his inner demons with alcohol and stuff like that. But tell me, in terms of the 80s in Hollywood, was there anyone a bigger name really than George Peppard in the early 80s?
No, I think he was one of the biggest stars that I worked with. He did a movie, Breakfast at Tiffany's, that was a very famous movie, the Truman Capote movie with, I'm trying to think of the woman's name now, Breakfast at Tiffany's, which was a famous movie. Her name was Audrey. Do you remember her name?
Audrey Hepburn, is it?
Yes, Audrey Hepburn. And that was probably one of my very favorite movies of all time. And I remember one of the first things I said to him when I met him was, I can't remember exactly how old he was, but he must have been, I was in my mid-20s or something. He might have been 50 or 55 and I remember saying to him, boy, that you were in my very favorite movie ever. And he said, oh, what was that? And I told him, sweet Sharon. And it was really exciting to be working with someone. Rock Hudson was a big star then from, he was doing Macmillan and Wife. Telly Savalas, who I did Kojak, he was a big star. So there were some people, James Garner, Rockford Files, there were some people that were very big movie stars before they started doing television. So when I met these people, I had seen them in like Kelly's Heroes with Kojak, or James Garner and the Americanization of Emily, some of his famous movies. And it was exciting to see these guys. They were sort of on the closing out their careers, getting closer to retiring, and they were doing television series. I did remember working with Buddy Ebsen when Buddy Ebsen was in his 70s, and I loved the Beverly Hillbillies so much. It was like one of my favorite shows. And I remember saying, oh, you used to kill me. I used to watch that show. I used to laugh and laugh and laugh. And he said, oh, I can hardly even remember the Beverly Hillbillies now, you know? So it was great working with kind of iconic actors that you had idolized for a long time.
Joey Aresco, an absolute pleasure talking to you on the airwaves today to relive your memories playing Presley in the A-Team, Season 2, Episode 4. Bad Time on the Border. No doubt once you're part of an historic franchise like the A-Team, you'll always be part of it. And the A-Team still going strong, showing in TV stations and TV networks all over the world, from England to France to Ireland, UK, South America, dubbed in so many languages. You played a role. You were in Season 2. You were in Episode 4. You played one of the bad guys, Presley, alongside Jack King, who played Patrol Van Taggart, Guinness Lipcombe, who played Prince, and the late David Graff as well, who played Cooper. Joey, thanks an awful lot today for sharing your memories of your time on the A-Team, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and hopefully 2021 will be a prosperous time for you.
Thank you for calling. You stay well. If there's ever a way for you to get that episode to me so I could see it again, because I get residuals for it, but I don't know how to view it again. If there was a way that you could ever get me a copy of that, I'd really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. I had a lot of fun, and I hope I gave you some inclination of what it was like. I wish I had remembered more particular details of that show, but you know, that's a long time, almost 30 years or so. So I'm glad you rattled my brain a little and brought me back to that time. It was really fun.
No problem, Joey. Take care and stay safe.
Okay, you be well. Okay, thank you. All right.